Welcome to Uncovering Trusts, a podcast by the Edison Group. I'm your host, Will Manuel, and today I'm joined by Michal Mordel, investment trust analyst at the Edison Group, for a special episode on our podcast covering the fascinating market of Vietnam. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And so, could you introduce us to the market opportunity in Vietnam?
Most certainly. Vietnam is indeed a fascinating market to invest in. It has been rapidly developing over the last few decades, benefiting from global trade and significant direct investments by big companies such as Samsung and Apple, which are establishing manufacturing bases in the country. Vietnam is welcoming foreign investments, which has accelerated as China has become more expensive and US China trade tensions have intensified. And this export oriented country boasts an average almost 7% GDP growth since the beginning of the century. At the same time, the country welcomes public market investments, with the total capitalization of stocks listed in Ho Chi Minh reaching over $200 billion, while it was set up just 25 years ago. This was due to the government listing state owned enterprises and high participation rate of Vietnamese people. I need to highlight that around 90% of the trading on the stock exchange is made by local private investors.
Okay, interesting. So, if we can now dig a little deeper, what are the main investment opportunities?
Manufacturing for exports has created ripple effects in Vietnam's economy and investment opportunity pool, starting with an entire ecosystem of smaller and larger companies that are servicing the factories. I mean, logistic companies such as ports, as well as materials producers, constructors, and such. Looking further, the development of the manufacturing base has led to a rapid increase in disposable income of the Vietnamese people. The GDP per capita increased more than tenfold since the year 2000. And naturally, this has created demand for convenience store chains, electronics, banks, and jewelers, among other services.
Okay, interesting. So tell me more about the demographics of Vietnam.
Oh, the demographics are one of the most important advantages of Vietnam. There are over 100 million people there, with 60% under the age of 35. So the people are young, are productive, and are mobile. This upward mobility fuels the urbanization, as Vietnam started at the very low base of the urbanization before the transformation started. Even now, despite the fact that the process is progressing rapidly and the real estate development market is booming, only around 40% of the people live in cities. This leaves a lot of room for further growth. When we look at the other countries, for example, in the US, the urbanization rate reaches 80%. Even China has reached around 70% already.
Wow. So it's only 40% in Vietnam and it's 70% in China. Right. A lot of headroom. So speaking of China, what is Vietnam's position in the current trade tensions? Is it affected by President Trump's reciprocal tariffs?
Yes, and this is a very important topic for Vietnam, as the US is the largest export market by far. At the same time, Vietnam's imports from the US are quite low, so the initial tariff announcement, which was based on the trade balance, was shockingly high, which naturally created some fear among the investors. As of today, Vietnam has agreed with the US to bring the tariffs to 20%, which isn't that much higher than the current US import tax in case of some of the products. For example, garment makers pay around 15 to 17%. So this should be easily absorbed by the economy. Unlike the 46% that was stated in the first announcement. This deal was greeted with a relief by the markets.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that's right. And how about the impact on Vietnam of the US China trade tensions?
Looking broader, overall, Vietnam is a great beneficiary of the trade tensions between the US and China so far, dating back to the previous Trump's tenure. as these tensions have accelerated the process of moving manufacturing away from China to Vietnam, among others. Vietnam's government tries to maintain good relationships with both countries through its diplomatic and economic efforts, dubbed the bamboo diplomacy. Vietnam was actually one of the first countries to strike a deal with the US concerning tariffs, as they started the legwork even before the announcement. Vietnam has welcomed sterling investments in the country. They negotiate import agreements with the US to balance the trade deficit, which includes food and fuel. One should also note that a huge riverside resort with two golf courses that is currently being built in Vietnam by the Trump organization.
Oh, interesting. Maybe I'll go there. I'm a big golfer. So this all sounds really positive, but obviously nothing's always all positive. So anything else we should be aware of?
Yeah, the only wrinkle that is yet to be smoothed on the in the tariff deal with the US is the transshipment clause that was stated in the deal announcement, which is a bit ambiguous and yet hard to assess, despite the fact that the tariffs are planned to come into force as soon as 1st of August. The clause states that there will be as much as 40% tariff on goods transshipped through Vietnam. While this is understandable, as we can assume that President Trump is mainly targeting imports from China with its policies, so he tries to avoid products being simply repackaged elsewhere. But we need to see the bigger picture. We need more details. For example, then the manufacturers are part of a bigger global supply chains, and they use materials or parts imported from other countries, and a lot of them are imported from China. So we don't have any details yet how tariff rate will be calculated for such products.
I see. And is there a risk that global supply chains will just simply move to the lowest tariff countries? Once the dust is settled on
Yeah.
the tariffs.
I understand that question. The situation is highly political and it's changing rapidly. So I don't think we can say anything with 100% certainty yet. But having said that, I'm fairly confident about Vietnam's position in the aftermath. Firstly, I think that Vietnam is unlikely to be put on any additional pressure as it does not pose threats to the US in terms of, for example, migration or drug trafficking. And so far, its diplomacy has proved successful in keeping good terms with both global powers. Secondly, Vietnam remains very cheap in terms of salaries, so there is little incentive to move the manufacturing plants yet. And the cost of labor for factory workers is about a third of that in coastal China. And thirdly, maybe the most important factor of all, the aforementioned the demographics. Not only there are millions of productive people there, but Vietnam has put a lot of emphasis on education, so they are highly skilled. The manufacturing of electronics becomes ever more sophisticated, so finding a suitable place for manufacturing with cheap and skilled workforce is not an easy task.
Right. So, given all of this, what we've been talking about, the tariffs, etc., what's been the impact on the near term economic outlook?
So, in the short term, there could be some impact on profitability as the companies adjust to the new normal. But the government maintains its target of a high 8% GDP growth in 2025, although they admit that it will be a bit challenging. But the economy already showed 8% growth in the first half of 2025. And economists globally share the view that Vietnam is poised to continue its solid growth. They are a bit less optimistic than the government, as the forecasts average around 6% for the coming 3 years annually, according to the consensus provided by Refinitiv.
And 6% is still very good growth. So how can UK investors participate in this growth story?
There are three investment vehicles listed on London Stock Exchange that invest solely in Vietnam, which are Vina Capital Vietnam Opportunity Fund. The second one is Vietnam Holding, and the third one, Vietnam Enterprise Investments, which over the long run tend to follow the performance of the Vietnamese market, while providing additional upside to the performance through their expertise. Other than that, investors can invest in funds with broader Asian mandate, although these tend to keep only a very minor direct exposure to Vietnam.
Sure. So, could you tell us a bit more about these Vietnam-focused funds?
Most certainly. The funds follow differentiated investment approaches, but all of them invest solely in Vietnam, and all three of them have proved their capabilities by delivering returns above the broad Vietnamese equity market over the long term. The largest and the oldest among the three is Vietnam Enterprise Investments, with total assets well above £1 billion. It is invested in public equities and is a bit more diversified than the other two, being invested in close to 50 companies compared to around 20 to 30 usually held by the other two. The fund follows a bottom up investment approach, while its policy allows for private equity, debt investments, and other. One can still consider it a pure listed equity play, as those represent a very minor part of their portfolio. Since the new lead manager took over in early 2024, the portfolio was rotated more toward high growth, small, and mid cap names.
Okay, interesting. And am I right in thinking there's a question mark around the continuity of the fund?
Yeah, there were some shareholders that voted in favor of winding down the fund on the recent during the recent AGM, but the fund has passed the continuation vote. There are currently discussions to find out the reasons of for dissatisfaction and to show proposed solutions, but we are still awaiting a commentary on that.
Okay. And so, what about the other two funds?
So the second one is Vina Capital Vietnam Opportunity Fund with around £700 million in assets, or VOF. VOF investment philosophy recognizes that Vietnam is inherently illiquid for their ticket size, and they adapt a private equity-like approach. Most of its portfolio represent companies that it invested on private terms, either by taking up stake in private companies or negotiating private terms with publicly listed companies. These include downside protections such as quasi debt investments or securing the investment on tangible assets that the investee company owns. At the first glance, one may miss that looking at their portfolio, as their investments turn into plain equity after reaching certain milestones or completing an IPO. So, at any given moment, most of the portfolio seems to be allocated to standard public equity investment. Given Vov's approach of investing for the long term and negotiating deals with actual influence on investee companies, in the result, the rotation of the portfolio is relatively slow, so it may not react to every market fluctuations. On the other hand, it gives access to investment opportunities outside the public listed universe. For example, healthcare investments are virtually non-existent on Vietnamese public market.
Right. And just to jump in, the Vietnam Opportunity Fund, VOF, is a client of Edison, and our research and other materials can be found on the website.
Correct. Similarly, the third fund, so Vietnam Holding or VNH, is also a client of Edison. And their investment approach is on the other side of the spectrum. It is the smallest among the three, and its relatively small ticket size allows it to quickly liquidate and reposition its portfolio of public equities, which allows it to capture the rising trends as well as quickly exit investments amid an unfavorable news flow. The manager estimates that it is able to sell the whole portfolio within a month without a significant discount, which is confirmed through VNH's share redemption facility. Each year, an investor can redeem all their shares at their net asset value without any constraints. And this is likely the reason why a VNH tends to trade without a meaningful discount to net asset value, unlike the other two funds, which are usually available at low double-digit discount.
Great. So thank you very much, Michal. This has been a really interesting rundown of the theme of Vietnam and
Thank
how
you.
to invest in it. So you've been listening to Uncovering Trusts, a podcast by the Edison Group. If you'd like to find out more about these Vietnamese trusts we've mentioned, please visit www.edisongroup.com.